So the bottom line is that, when we have misalignment, we have major problems. Like, to me, this is the biggest problem in recruitment, is not having people aligned on what good looks like, not having people aligned on terms like culture fit, on diversity, on potential, on ass, some of these things. This to me is really the root of all evil in recruiting. And so when we're going into an organization to figure out, do we have problems to solve around the way we hire? One of the things we look at is, how do we make hiring decisions? And what are the risks we're taking? How have we kind of built our process today? And so there's two kinds of hiring decision problems. One is the classic kind of false positive, where you want to avoid hiring someone that's bad, right? If you go back to your statistics class, false positives are where you thought it was going to be good, it turned out to not be good, right? You thought the person would be a good hire, turns out they weren't a good hire. But there's also a false negative problem, which is saying no to someone who would have actually been good. And a lot of interviewing processes are not built around that. And when you think about the focus on diversity and inclusion a lot of organizations have, this notion of hiring people that maybe have a different background, bring a different point of view to the conversation for the team, false negative risk is a really big risk. There's a lot of people where biases are driving the hiring decision, and we're saying no to someone we should have said yes to. And it's purely based on bias, assumptions, generalizations. So we want to make sure we're making very good evidence-based hiring decisions, and not just worried about hiring someone that's bad, which I totally think we should avoid hiring someone that's not qualified or won't be good, but also recognize that there's false negative risks as well, that missing out on someone good is actually a problem. A quick funny story, one of my clients is a VP of talent acquisition at a well-known company, and she was telling me that she was really concerned about this notion of false negatives, that in fact, she thought that they were really missing out on some great talent. And so one of the things she did is she tracked where some of the people that she had said no to, where the team had said no to, the company said, we don't want to hire this person. She tracked where they went. She'd take a look at where the person actually ended up going to work, looked at LinkedIn, where did they go? Well, it turns out that almost all of the people they were saying no to were going to the very companies that hiring managers were asking her team to source from. So these people that they were saying no to were going to the companies that they said, we want you to get people out of these companies because these are the best people. And she's like, are you kidding me? Like, you just said, we just had this person here. We could have closed them. We could have hired this person. Now in 3 months, you're going to find this person. You're not going to remember you interviewed, and they say, oh, this person looks fantastic, just because they went, like, oh my God. But this is some of the problems we have. We don't really have a way to measure false negatives effectively. So we don't recognize how big of a problem it is. So for any process you're building around hiring, you want to make sure you're optimized for making great hires, but you also want to make sure you're avoiding, making bad hires. You want to make sure that you're avoiding missing out on good hires. It wasn't just one thing, and it wasn't just one team, and it wasn't a big sample size. So she only did this with a handful of director level roles. But it is, she identified that there is a really strong pedigree bias for people coming out of certain companies. She identified that we were not necessarily making evidence-based hiring decisions. And she also identified the fact that we did not have a really good mechanism in place to avoid bad hires. What happens a lot of times in hiring decisions, people get really afraid of taking a risk, right? And so if even one person is kind of, I'm not too sure, a lot of hiring teams will just say, all right, let's not hire the person, rather than being open to taking a risk, right? If you don't define your risk tolerance, if you don't talk about the kind of risks that are okay and not okay to take, for example, we're totally fine hiring someone that doesn't know that version of Excel, but will never hire an ass. That may be an example of a hiring philosophy, a hiring principle you have. You may say we are absolutely comfortable hiring someone that doesn't have 10 years of experience in this space, as long as they've achieved something like this, this, and this. That's okay. It could be over 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. It doesn't matter. But getting really clear on the kind of risks you're okay taking, I think that was really the big outcome from her conversation with the leaders that were potentially making these hiring mistakes. We don't know if they were hiring mistakes. It could have been that they wouldn't have been successful at our company and they'd be fine over there. Cultures are different, companies are different. But she used it as a way to kind of insert this new kind of thinking, which is, what risks are we okay taking? And are we missing out on good talent? Let's talk about how we make sure we're not missing out on good talent. So consensus as a decision-making model, where everyone, all 5, 6, 7 interviewers have to all be 100% yes before we hire. That's an example of a decision-making model that I think has a much higher probability of leading to false negatives, right? Because you're requiring every single person to agree, versus we have a client, for example, in Brazil that made the case very early. We're going to hire different kinds of profiles. And one of the leaders there, she was telling me over a focus group conversation, she said, John, I've had to role model for my team. It's okay to take risks. It's okay to take these risks. And I have had 3 or 4 people out of my 5, 6, 7 person interviewing team who have been a no hire on someone, and I've hired them anyways. That's my opportunity. That's my obligation as a leader, is to demonstrate, be a role model around good risk taking. And she said, now 3, 6 months later, I can point to these people we were nervous about who are wildly successful. And that's the way I'm teaching my team it's okay to take risks. But I don't take risks just for the sake of taking risks. I'm not rolling the dice. I'm not flipping a coin. Like I am using good judgment as a leader, but my team gets so risk averse. You know what I mean? They get afraid of taking a risk. And so I have to break them of that. And that's a real leadership opportunity. That's a real leadership opportunity. So our hiring bar is this. It's kind of an abstract idea, right? This notion that we have a high hiring bar, low hiring bar, medium hiring bar, and what it means. To me, when I think about a hiring bar, it's really kind of who we hire and how we hire. It's really a combination of not just having a profile and defining all the what good look like stuff that we talked about, but also mechanisms we have in place to make sure we're hiring great people.